now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. So basically, here are a few topics that I'll pretty much cover. Today, the agenda, we'll talk about the COVID, frequently asked questions, what is the eligibility center, the registration process, core courses, and alternative standards for Division 1 or 2 institutions. Distance or e-learning, which is also known as homeschooling, sports participation, and any other resources that you may have or may need. So here we say, basically when COVID hit, the Eligibility Center received a tremendous amount of calls and questions about what type of relief would be provided to the student athletes in the present and upcoming years. To sum it all up, the Eligibility Center provided flexibility in the initial eligibility standards for all individuals enrolling in 21, 22, and 22, 23 by simply applying the automatic initial eligibility waiver. Okay. That criteria to receive this waiver is basically what I'll be covering today. Here's a QR code that you can scan for any type of frequently asked questions as it relates to the COVID Eligibility Center requirements. So feel free to scan that. Like I said, this information will also be available at the end as well. For those of you that may not know, we get a lot of questions about what is the NCAA Eligibility Center. It was formerly known as the Clearinghouse, as known to others. But as you know, we don't call it the Clearinghouse anymore. It's called the NCAA Eligibility Center. That may sound familiar to some, but we just got to get in the habit of saying NCAA Eligibility Center. And they basically focus on the academic preparedness, sports participation, high school courses, and it also, of course, provides customer service to student athletes as well as parents as well. And if you want to compete at any Division 1 or 2 school, you must meet the academic initial eligibility requirements as well as amateurism requirements. Here are just a little fun facts to know about the NCAA. I won't go through all of them. As you can see, there are 24 sports housed under the NCAA. There are 3 divisions, of course, Division 1, 2, and 3. We have over 500,000 student athletes, 39 affiliated organizations, and some others just mentioned here on this slide. Registration. First thing you want to know, of course, is where do I go to register for the Eligibility Center? First thing is eligibilitycenter.org. For those listening in, that's the Eligibility Center website. You just simply type that in, and this is the screen that you will see once you're logged in. You also need to know what type of account to register for. There are 2 types of account, a profile and a certification account. So now you ask yourself, well, what's the difference? A profile account is for those of you that are interested in any Division 3 institution, or you just flat out don't know which division you want to compete. Okay, there's no registration fee for a profile account, and I will discuss registration fee in just a second. And also, if you decide at any moment that you want to transition to a Division 1 or 2 institution, you can change that anytime from a profile page. A certification account. If you're planning on attending any Division 1 or 2 institution, as you can see, the cost and registration for a certification account is $90. And if you're an international student athlete, it's $150. Well, let me put a bug out there and give you all some tips, because many of you may not know that there is a fee waiver for the Eligibility Center registration. This fee waiver is provided by your guidance counselor. So if you have any guidance counselor that's listening in and you're unsure of how to access this waiver, feel free to stick around, and after the call, I can provide that information to you, or I can assist you with trying to get that information. It's basically a code that's provided for the student to enter at the conclusion of the registration process. Okay. And before you take any official visits or sign an NLI, you must complete a certification account. So it's required for those of you that are planning on taking official visits to Division 1 or 2 institutions. Here's pretty much what your dashboard would look like once you're registered and in. As you can see, what's circled at the top, your name, your eligibility center ID number is up there. Your graduation date and your initial full-time collegiate enrollment date is listed. Some important things to do: always review your dashboard open tasks. Okay, this is where you will see any additional information required on your end as it relates to your eligibility status. It's going to tell you some things that you may be missing that you need to submit, such as test scores or transcripts, or just any other open tasks that you may have. Make sure you pay attention to your graduation date and enrollment dates. This is very important as it relates to transfers, because enrolled at a 2-year institution, registration with the NCAA isn't required. So when a transfer student athlete enrolls at a Division I or II school, they often put their initial full-time enrollment as the date that they started at the D1 or D2 school. Well, that's incorrect, because your actual date that you started your initial full-time enrollment was when you started at the 2-year school. So we always run into those issues when we're dealing with transfers when they enter their initial enrollment period. That's another thing I wanted to point out. Pay attention to your transcript's receipt date. If you sent your transcript, just an example, if you sent the transcript in on June 13th and you go back in and log into your account, and if you're not seeing it and it's June 20th, you need to reach out to the eligibility center immediately to see, did they receive those transcripts or have they been uploaded to your profile? Make sure you edit all of your account information, such as just all schools that you attended in high school. That must be listed. Make sure you list every sport that you participated in or any sport that you will be wanting to participate in at the Division II level. Also, make sure that your address is correct, your email address is correct, as well as a phone number on file as well. All right, let's talk about college admissions for a second. Any of you know, in order to compete at a Division I or II school, you must apply and be accepted by that school. Now, when it comes to the cost of attendance or financial aid or even academic scholarships, that's when you will need to reach out to that NCAA school that you're planning to attend to gather more information about that. You must be on an institution request list, also known as an IRL. So I guess you say, well, what happens with the information once I submit it and register with the Eligibility Center? Us compliance administrators, we're the one that places you on our IRL list. This is where we begin the monitoring. Once you begin the recruitment process, we get that information from the coaches and we activate you on our list. And that's when we can monitor your eligibility status throughout your high school progression. We know when you have submitted test scores, transcripts, or any open tasks that you may have. That's when we will begin communicating with you as well as coaches to get this information in. And we also can see your final eligibility status as well. Communicate with everyone assisting you with this process. It starts with your guidance counselor. So make sure you ask your guidance counselors, coaches, parents, mentors, or even college administrators to assist you with this, because it's a lot of steps to take and a lot of information needed before you receive your final academic status. Here we'll talk about core courses, okay? Some may ask, well, what's considered a core course? This is what the NCAA uses to determine your eligibility status. Every high school has a list of approved core courses. Those core courses have to be taught at the high school regular academic level, as well as taught by qualified individuals such as your teachers. And lastly, those core courses must be considered and accepted at the 4-year institution that you're planning to attend. If you're unsure on where to locate your high school's list of approved core courses, here's the link for it. And for those that's listening in, it's eligibilitycenter.org/core list. Now, the NCAA put in some COVID alternative standards, and that's what we're going to cover today for Division I. I'll start with Division I first. So some of these alternative standards, in order to be eligible to compete, you will either become an early academic qualifier, a qualifier, an academic red shirt, or a non-qualifier. The qualifications for an early academic qualifier at the Division I level, you will need 14 core units in the required subject areas and a 3.0 GPA in those core courses. This is based on a student athlete's pre-7th semester in high school. If these requirements are met, the student athlete will be eligible for competition, practice, and athletics aid in his or her first year. Listed here are the subject areas in which this information is taken care of. As you can see, there's 3 years of English, 2 years of math, 2 years of science, 2 years of additional math or science courses, and 5 years of additional courses that you can use. If you are in an early academic qualifier, you'll be able to practice, receive A, and compete your first year in college. So what happens if you don't meet the early academic status or qualifications? The NCAA uses the 10-7 rule. That basically means you have met your core course progression before the starting of your second semesters. As mentioned before, it was 14 core units to become an early academic qualifier, but to become a qualifier, it's only 16 core units that will be needed, a 2.3 GPA in those required subject areas, and of course, proof of graduation has to be submitted on your official transcript. If you are a qualifier your first year there, you will be eligible to receive athletics aid, practice, as well as compete. Right here, we have the Division I qualifier status, okay? Here, these are the subject areas used to meet the qualifier status as mentioned in the previous slide. Here we have the academic red shirt. Okay, this is used when a student athlete does not meet the early academic qualifier status their first year in college. In order to receive an academic red shirt, the student athlete must have 16 core units, a minimum of 2.0 GPA, and as mentioned before, proof of graduation must be included on the final transcript. With an academic red shirt, a student athlete is only allowed to practice and receive aid their first year. Again, listed here, you've seen this before. These are the core courses used to meet that academic red shirt requirements. 4 years of English, 3 years of math, 2 years of natural sciences, and so on. And as mentioned before, you're only allowed to practice and receive aid if you are an academic red shirt. If you do not meet the status of an early academic qualifier, a qualifier, or an academic red shirt, the student athlete will basically be deemed a non-qualifier. If a student athlete is a non-qualifier, he or she will not be allowed to practice, will not be allowed to receive athletics aid, or compete their first year in college. I normally receive a lot of calls quite often from coaches about whether the NCAA will require or start back considering scores for the ACT or SAT. Well, luckily for any individual enrolling in 2021, 21, and 22, which is this year, and 22, 23 will not be required to submit test scores to the Eligibility Center. Now, please be mindful that just because the Eligibility Center is requiring you to submit test scores, that whatever Division I or II school that you are enrolling in, they may require you to submit the ACT or the SAT scores. So this doesn't mean don't take those tests. This basically means that the Eligibility Center will not ask for it. However, the institution that you're planning to enroll in may ask for it. That's just an FYI. This is what the core course timeline looks like. As I mentioned, a lot of those requirements in order to become an academic early qualifier, a lot of those requirements would have been needed to be met by the 7th semester. So this is basically what it looks like. When you enter the 9th grade, you have 4 years to graduate, which is a total of 8 semesters. So if you have met those core course requirements basically prior to the start of your senior year, which is August to December normally, that means you have basically met the pre-7th requirement. And of course, you must graduate on time with your class in order to meet this requirement as well. This is what it looks like. In case you don't know how to take those courses, or you may want to share this with your academic counselors or whatever, you'll basically take 4 of those core courses each of your 4 years there. 4 times 4 equals 16. So your 9th grade year, you'll take an English, math, social science, and so on, basically until you reach your 12th grade year. And that's how you know that you will meet the 16 core units to be eligible for competition your first year there. Let's talk about the Division II alternative standards. As you can see here, for Division I, there were 4 possible outcomes in order to be a student athlete at college. Well, here we only have 3. And these are basically what the NCAA put in place for the COVID alternatives. You either become an early academic qualifier, a qualifier, or a partial qualifier. In order to be an early academic qualifier, you would need 14 core units and a 2.5 GPA instead of a 3.0 like Division 1. All of this is based on what you need to do prior to your 7th semester, as I just mentioned on the chart and the timeline that I just showed. If you are an early academic qualifier, this is basically what they use to determine that status. 3 years of English, 3 years of math, 2 years of natural science, and 6 years of other additional courses. If this is predetermined by your 7th semester, you'll be eligible for athletics aid, competition, and practice your first year in college. Now, if you're not an early academic qualifier, you basically have the option of being a qualifier. And here's what you need to be a qualifier. Instead of 14 core units, you see 16 core units here. There's a 2.2 GPA. In Division 1, it was a 2.3 GPA in those core courses, but here is 2.2. Proof of graduation must be submitted on your final official transcript. And during this qualification status, if you are a qualifier, you'll be allowed to practice, receive athletics aid, and compete your first year in college. These are the subject areas used to determine this qualification status: 3 years of English, 2 years of math, 2 years of natural sciences, and so on. With the 3 years of additional math and English, is 2 years of science and 4 years of additional courses. If you are a qualifier, as mentioned, you can practice, compete, and receive aid. If for any reason that you do not meet the early academic qualification status or the qualifier status, you will be deemed a partial qualifier. And what you can do basically to be a partial qualifier, you have to submit proof of graduation that has to be included on your final official transcript. And you're also allowed to practice and receive aid your first year there. You cannot compete if you are a partial qualifier. As mentioned before, the NCAA basically waived the test scores for Division II as well for 2020-21, this year, 21-22, and 22-23. Again, if the institution that you're planning to enroll in, if they require standardized tests such as ACTs or SATs, you will have to submit those test scores to that institution. So basically, flexibility in the initial eligibility process was provided to all individuals enrolling in 21, 22, and 22, 23, provided they met all the criteria previously mentioned. Here are some other QR codes that you can scan for other initial eligibility cases, if in case you do not meet those qualifications as mentioned. They are Division I academic requirements as well as Division II academic requirements as well. For Division III, the NCAA doesn't determine initial eligibility for Division III schools. That Division III school determines their own admission requirements, financial aid, and eligibility requirements. So if a student wants to attend a Division III institution, a profile account is sufficient enough at that level. Also note that even with distant learning and online learning, that homeschool programs are accepted, provided that they are reviewed and determined by the NCAA, which there's a toolkit that they use to determine their eligibility status. And as mentioned on the previous slide, just make mention of, just because you took online or hybrid courses in high school does not mean that you were homeschooled. Just wanted to put that out there. Sports participation. Basically, when you register for a certification account, make sure you select all of the sports that you would like to play in college. So if you want to go to college, or you go to college for football and you decide that you want to play baseball or basketball, make sure you list that at the time of your registration during your account. Update your information frequently. If you play multiple teams in high school or want to, make sure you include that during your registration process as well. And the last thing, make sure you always request your final amateurism before you enroll at a Division I or II school. Name, image, and likeness. I know we've all heard of this lately and what's been going on with the name, image, and likeness information. This is a total separate conversation here because it's so much information as it pertains to this. However, I always break it down to a lot of individuals and student athletes get it confused with, oh, I can get paid to play right now. Well, that is not the case. As you see, it states name, image, and likeness, not athletics ability. Okay. So that information, if you are receiving calls or deals from other institutions or outside agencies and things like that, you must report that to your institution compliance department, and you also must follow whatever rules and laws that your institution as well as your state have in place. Listed below for any other NIL resources, you can see the email address here or the web address here at ncaa.org/NIL. I always say ask before acting. That's one thing that the Eligibility Center advises also. Feel free to call the Eligibility Center if you are unsure about anything as far as your Eligibility Center process, NIL, transcript, test scores, or whatever. Always ask before you act. Proactive student actions. If you want to play sports in college, share your NCAA ID with the schools that are recruiting you. That's one thing. When coaches reach out, most coaches, the first thing that they ask are you registered with the Eligibility Center? You should be able to provide that ID number to them at the time when your recruitment begins. Apply to the schools of your choosing to be accepted. Go ahead and start putting in applications at any other schools that you want to or whatever. So just in case you never know, the school that you have already applied to, they can also start recruiting you, and you can already have a jump start on that information. Go ahead and request your final amateurism certification before you enroll. If you're planning to enroll in the fall, the earliest you can do that is April 1st. If you're planning to enroll in the spring, which is January, or the winter session, the earliest you can start requesting your amateurism is October 1st. Ask your high school counselor to submit your final transcript with proof of graduation. Normally that is done after you graduate, a couple of weeks after. So as soon as you graduate, I will be in my high school guidance counselor's office within a week later. It normally doesn't take that long to process transcripts, but in order for you to meet certain certifications, you must have proof of graduation listed on your final transcripts. There are considerations given to students with education impacting disabilities. So that is also found on the NCAA website as well. Now, if you want information or access to this information, there is also some other web addresses that you can use to find this information. It's listed on the NCAA website: college student athletes, the guide for college bound, initial eligibility, Division I and II academic requirements. Even if you have any questions about NLIs, which is National Letters of Intent, they also have a website for that as well. Okay, so this pretty much concludes the Eligibility Center process on how it goes registration. So Mr. Stewart, if you have any questions, or if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out or contact me. I can put my information in the chat box or whatever. So just let me know.
Yes, ma'am. Please do that and put your information, if you don't mind, in the chat box. But I will also make sure that I share your email address with all of the student athletes as well as parents who will be receiving this recording. But again, from EETA, I do want to just say thank you so much for taking the time to go over everything A to Z to what a student athlete and a parent needs to know, because this process, as we know, can be overwhelming at times, especially if you don't have the guidance and the help to navigate through. So I truly, truly appreciate you and thank you for your time.
You're welcome. Feel free to reach out if you have any other questions or need to get any other information that was discussed.